Well, Karen Reed, is she a cop girlfriend or is she a cop killer? We've been talking about that in our series. 4 episodes we've dropped now on the Karen Reed case. Tonight, James Buckland and I are going to talk about episode number 4. Episode number 4 was entitled Evidence That Demands a Verdict. We're going to put you in the jury seat, let you make your choice, and I'm going to tell you my choice. All of this and more on today's Charlie Crime Talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
James, we welcome all the folks to our show tonight, right?
We certainly do. We thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we want to remind everybody about our website, charliecrimebuster.com. That's charliecrimebuster.com, and they can also support us by becoming a badge BADGE member for as little as $3 a month. That's less than a penny a day. And that's at peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, or just want to give us a shout out, you can go email us at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com.
Yeah, we call that reach out with a shout out, right?
Reach out with a shout out.
Yep,
That's it.
reach out with a shout out. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Yep.
That's right.
You know, James, I thought we were maybe going to do a storm watcher show tonight.
Yeah, I did too.
You know how those storm watchers run up and down for these tornadoes and everything?
Yeah.
You and I right now are sitting on this little peninsula at the end of the United States, and there's a big, huge hurricane headed our way.
That's right. Helene is a mean looking hurricane storm. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just I guess we're just a day or so away from from its hitting the mainland, huh?
Within the next 48 hours, yeah. And they're saying that the swell could be, because it's moving fast. They said the swell could be anywhere from 12 to 18 feet.
Wow.
Ocean swell. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I have a lot of security sites down in Sarasota and Clearwater and Tampa. They're all bracing for it. Pretty big time down there.
Yeah.
With the storm surge that's coming in, you know.
Yeah. It's gonna be interesting. And they're telling everybody that the law enforcement is telling everybody, we are not going to come and get you. We've asked you to evacuate, and they do not have the resources to come and get you. So if you don't leave, you will be stuck until they can get to the water to recede. So
yeah, if you're in the path of this storm surge, for goodness sakes, take shelter and get out of there, right?
Yep, that's right. If you've been advised to leave, we advise you to leave. And of course, Governor DeSantis has already issued a state of emergency for the state of Florida. So everyone's bracing for the impact of the storm.
No doubt about it. Well, we certainly wish everybody in the state of Florida, and maybe even, I don't know, after this hits Florida, it's going to kind of go up through Georgia and all the way up there. Maybe more of a tropical storm then, but whoever's in the path of this hurricane, please take shelter, be safe, and be smart about it.
That's right. And it's like at the end of the show, we say, the life you save may be your own because you're doing something about it,
That could be true there, right? Yeah. It's just some people, though stubborn, don't like to leave. And unfortunately, they don't understand that if they are in a dangerous situation and they're not leaving, they're actually putting other people in danger because somebody's got to come and get them,
Right. Exactly.
And that puts them in danger too. So, don't be selfish about it, folks.
That's
if you're in a place, of danger, get out of there, find some other place to at least rest until the storm sides and then go back. So that's our hurricane portion of our show tonight, right?
That's right. So tell us, Charlie, tell us what new happened in this case this week.
Well, we got several things that is new that's happening. One is the fact that we have a brand new prosecutor coming to the new trial.
Yep.
A guy by the name of Hank Brennan. And interesting enough, he was the attorney that actually defended a gangster, and this is really appropriate for the people in the Boston area where this all took place. A gangster by the name of Whitey.
Hmm.
And Whitey was a gangster there and actually went on the run and actually eluded authorities for 25, almost 30 years.
Wow.
Was recently
Wow.
just caught, a few years ago out in California, but he was actually on the most wanted list and was number two under Bin Laden, and that's how
Wow.
yeah, that's how I guess you would say notorious he was. But so Frank Brennan actually was his attorney, so he's a very high profile attorney. Of course, then he was a defense attorney. Now he's coming in to prosecute the case.
Wow. How
Now, Mike
tables
Morse,
turn.
yeah, Mike Morsey, the district attorney there, says that he's very, very capable. Had a lot of really nice things to say about him. But one thing that was of interest to me when he was describing him, said he would be fair and all that, but also said that he had experience. Now, get this, I'm looking at my notes, in complex law enforcement cases. Now,
Hmm.
what in the world does that mean? Complex law
Complex.
enforcement cases.
Complex law enforcement cases. That kind of gives you the impression that there might be something under the covers when it comes to the the police there.
Well, we know that that the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, is now suspended without pay.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
also know now that, and this is something else that's new when we talk about what's new, there's also been two other state troopers now that are under internal affairs investigation that were working on this case. One was Lieutenant Tully, and another one was a Sergeant Uri. Both of those state troopers are now under investigation by the internal affairs. Actually, right now, James, four state troopers are being investigated in internal affairs that were tied to this case, and one Canton police officer who was tied to this case. So I guess
So five law enforcement.
that's about as complex as you can get
Yeah.
if you have all those officers under investigation who were all actively involved in this case as investigators. So
Yep. Yep.
maybe that's what he means by this
Yeah.
phrase that caught my attention: complex law enforcement activity.
Complex law
Yeah,
enforcement.
yeah.
Well, that's
Uh,
good. That's
could
good.
it
That's
could be just another another term for crooked, right?
yeah. Yeah, complex. Yeah, that would definitely be crooked, or
Yeah,
could
and
be.
that really has been, I think, a major part of this case, and why probably the jury could not come to any decision was they just didn't know what to think about the accusations about the cops that are involved.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. It's very, 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 very possible. Very true. I mean, with
Had to have
five,
a sip of my Diet Coke here. We ought to get them as a sponsor, don't you think?
yeah, yeah. So, out of curiosity, because after I heard it, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So, what crazy crook story did you tell again this week? Just remind our listeners that didn't listen to the podcast, or those that did listen to the podcast, refresh them, and then those that didn't, they can hear it for the first time.
Well, our crazy crook was a young lady who actually, uh, you got to hand it to her. She wanted to get a job, so she wanted to go to her interview. Although the job was a job as a stripper, but decided that since she didn't have a car, she went to a car dealership and had somebody call the car dealership while she was talking to them about the car as they were getting ready for the test ride. And when somebody who called the dealership got them their attention to the phone, she jumped in the car and took off. And she actually
Oh,
drove that vehicle, James, some 60 miles to her job interview. And
whoa,
when, I mean, she'd already given them her name and identification, that sort of thing. That's how
yep,
crazy these people are.
I know.
And so when she was arrested, she was shocked. She said, "I brought the car back,"
Yeah.
But nonetheless, she got arrested, and it
Oh,
was a
boy.
pretty crazy situation. These folks really do some crazy stuff.
They do. They do. It's crazy. So, what was the defense evidence that was
Well,
shared with the Karen Reed case?
as we said, James, in this particular episode, we're going to let everybody put themselves in the jury box
Yeah,
and kind of look
yeah,
at the defense. One other thing, real quick, before we get into that, you mentioned what was new, something else new. You remember we were talking about the fact that when the other jury had met, they had, according to their reports, they had unanimously agreed that two of those charges that she was not guilty on,
right,
that of second degree murder, and the other one was leaving the scene of an accident.
right.
Well, the judge that was there actually ruled against the attorneys, the defense attorneys, who actually petitioned the court to go ahead and drop those two charges in the new trial. She said, no, it was, it was a mistrial. We did not pool the jury, et cetera, et cetera. And so it looked like that it was all over. But now they have appealed that, and the Massachusetts uh, state jury
Appellate court.
appellate court, yeah,
Uh-huh.
have now ruled that this case, meaning the case we're talking about, this appeal to
Uh-huh.
drop those two charges in there, is actually going before the Supreme Court of Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so they're going to listen to the attorneys as they argue that the first two charges they think against Karen Reed ought to be dropped because the jury that deadlocked were in total agreement that she was not guilty on those two charges.
Hmm.
So we'll see what happens from there. But that's something else that new that just happened, and we want to make sure we keep our folks updated on it.
Good, good. Well, that's
Yeah.
that's actually that's good compared to what the situation was for her earlier.
Yeah, before, they said, no, we're not going to listen to it. You can be
Yeah.
charged on it. And she still may be charged on all three. It's according to whatever the state, Supreme State of, Court of Massachusetts says. So, all
Wow.
right, let's get into the evidence.
Okay. This is the defense evidence, right?
Yeah, each of
Okay.
the defense goes first. The
Hmm.
prosecution has the burden of proof, so they let them go last, have kind of the last word in it.
Uh-huh.
The defense started out with a phrase, a little catchy phrase, because as you do their closing, you want to try to tell a story. And he started out by saying, "Look the other way." And he was saying to the jury that the prosecution wants you to look the other way. Look the other way, for instance, in the conflict of interest. As we know, the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, who is now suspended without pay, under investigation. He had close connections to the people that owned the house where John O'Keefe's body was lying in the yard. Now, for the folks that are listening, if you haven't kept up, please go back to our website and get caught up. But just to give you a little summary, Karen Reed, John O'Keefe went out bar hopping. Afterward, they were going to an after party at another cop's house by the name of Brian Albert. And when they got there, she says that she let him off because she was going home. She wasn't feeling well. And then she says that she left him off to go in the house. Well, the next day, John O'Keefe's body is found injured, seriously injured, barely alive in the yard. And that was before he died, but he was in the yard there.
Mm.
Well, the prosecution says, hey, Karen Reed backed up in anger and hit him and killed him. The defense says, no, he went into the house, got into a fight, and they injured him there and then put him out in the yard and tried to frame Karen Reed on it. So that's the case. So the defense is saying, look the other way because the investigator in this case is close friends with the guy who was in the house where they alleged that he was beat up.
Mm.
He also said, look the other way. And he talks about that morning when the defense is alleging that he was beat up in the house, said for that whole morning, there was a whole flurry of phone calls among the 12 people that were in that house going back and forth all through the morning.
Hmm.
But interesting enough, it was explained by the witnesses that, oh, all of those were butt dials. Well, uh, I've had butt dials, everybody had butt dials, but they seem to be a whole lot of them. And so
Mm.
the defense is saying, no, 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 this there's something going on here. This
Right.
is evidence that they were trying to cover up this crime. He said also look the other way, and one of the defense's parts of evidence was that night there was a snowstorm, and there was a snowplow that came by there 3 times, not once, twice, but 3 times it came by there. Now, Michael Proctor, who the defense believes was very biased, didn't even bother to interview the snowplow operator. And the defense and other people found the snowplow operator, asked him the 3 times he passed that yard when allegedly after Karen Reed had hit him and he had been in the yard. Well, this snowplow operator said he went by there 3 times and he didn't see anybody in the yard whatsoever. So the defense says that proves that that did not happen like the prosecution said,
Uh-huh.
but that he was beat up in the house and brought out later. So he says, look the other way when it comes to the snowplow. The other piece of evidence that I think was the defense used that was really resonated with some people is that he had they had his phone, and you and I always talk about. Remember what we talk about, that people always leave a footprint. What kind of footprint?
Digital footprint.
A
Yep.
digital footprint, right?
Yep. That's right.
Well, according to the defense, it would show on John O'Keefe, and during that time after he went into the house,
Hmm.
that he was descending and ascending steps. Well, when you go into that house, there are steps immediately that go down to the basement.
Right.
Now, the defense believes that he went down in the basement, and particularly they allege that probably Brian Albert, the owner, who has a hothead, some people say, and the other Brian, another Brian there that was there, Kenny, that said that they think that they beat him up while he was down there, and the dog bit him while he was down there. So they
Hmm.
said the digital footprint of him descending there is evidence that he was actually in the house, because the people in the house said he never got in the house.
Hmm.
They said, we believe he did because he descended. The other thing was that his sister-in-law, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, McCabe, Jennifer McCabe, according to the defense, they brought out an expert that said at 2:21, she did a Google search. How long does it take for someone to die in the cold?
Uh-huh.
Well, if she did that research at 2:21 in the morning, that means she knew, if she did, she would have to known that he was out there in the yard, and that would go according to the defense's allegations that he was beat up and left in the yard to die.
Right.
So they said that one. Then the other thing he brought out that I thought was really interesting, said that Karen, or rather Jennifer McCabe, said that from like 12 something to all the way up to almost 1 o'clock, said that actually 12:29 to 12:50, yeah, 12:29 to 12:50, Jennifer McCabe said, I was looking out of the front door, and Karen Reed's vehicle was right there, and I watched it as it would pull up. I watched it from 12:29 to 12:50. But James, again, that digital footprint, when Karen Reed went to John's house that morning at 12:36, her phone connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi. So she could not have been sitting in front of that house at 12:36 like
Exactly.
Jennifer said, if her phone connected to the Wi-Fi back at John's house when she went to John's house when she left. So
Exactly.
that is proof, and I think I agree with this part, that was definitely proof that Jennifer McCabe is lying about that.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
no way she could see her that length of time if she was somewhere else and the Wi-Fi connecting to John's Wi-Fi. So I think that was a big one as well. And then of course he talked about you remember John Kennedy's we did a whole deal on that one, the magic bullet.
Yes.
Well, he said he has a magic hair because the prosecution alleges that there was a hair found on the bumper that matched John O'Keefe. And the defense attorney, Jackson, says it had to be a magic hair because there was a blizzard that night, 30, 40 mile per hour wind, and they were driving back and forth. There's no way that hair would have stayed on that bumper. So he called it the magic
Magic
hair,
hair.
yeah, the magic hair. So that was his defense against that. And then I think probably the strongest part of the defense, though, I believe, was the introducing of their experts, the last two people that came to the stand before the defense closed their case. And that was what we call Crash Daddy. Remember we talked about
Yep.
Crash Daddy last
Crash
week?
Daddy. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, ARCA, that and Dr. Rencher. And basically, they have degrees in physics, degrees in science. They study these kind of pedestrian accidents for a living. They're experts in it. And they basically said, number one, they said that the evidence does not stand up to the fact that John Keith was hit by that car. This is first of all, the damage to the vehicle is not does not reflect that he hit that car. They said also the injuries to John O'Keefe is not compatible with him being hit by that car. I think that was probably the strongest evidence that the defense brought to the jury.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Because you would think that as much information as they shared, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, there's definitely reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every instance that you pointed, there's very, very possibility of doubt
Right?
being introduced in every single one of those scenarios,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know? And, he was right. And I like the way that he phrased it, look the other way. Because
yeah, yeah.
the prosecution,
Right.
trying to paint a certain picture and you have to look the other way.
Yeah, but now we haven't yet shared the prosecution side.
Ah, so what is the prosecution evidence?
So the prosecution, not to be outdone by the defense, they had to have their phrase.
Ah, okay, okay.
And so he jumps up in the closing and he said four times, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And he brings out that four different people that morning, Karen Reed said the words, I hit him.
Hmm.
And that there wasn't just one person, but four people.
Yeah,
Now
but
we
does
know
that
that
make it
Karen.
hearsay?
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's it was allowed in court
Hmm.
because of the fact that it was related to the crime in such a way that it got around the hearsay words and
Hmm.
it was introduced as evidence.
Yeah.
It This is something that the defendant said, so you can use hearsay. You can say what the defendant said. You just can't say somebody else comes up to you and told them they said that.
Is it she
So
alleged she said that, or it's
yeah.
confirmed that she said that? Which
Well,
is
I mean, he said that four different witnesses said that he said that. Now
for
she says what I really said was, did I hit him? Did
uh-huh.
I hit him? And she said she was confused. He was there. She was emotional and that sort
Yep.
of thing. The way she went with that. But then he also went into the fact that the prosecution comes back and says that there was trouble in paradise, that John and her were not getting along, that even the
Hmm.
children came and said that John said that the course of their romance had ran its course, that he was getting ready to break up with her, that she was angry, that they were fighting. They were fighting up till that time that they left and
Hmm.
went on that party together. And he says they were fighting that night. She texted him 56 times, 53, 56 times that night.
Hmm.
They had voicemails that they played where she said, I hate you, I hate you, you're a pervert, and just saying terrible, terrible things.
Hmm.
So he introduced that they had a rocky relationship. That was another thing they did. And then he came up and he said uh, that that there was, around his body, there was found uh, lens of the tail light on Karen's car, and that there was a glass because they knew that John had a cocktail glass in his hand when he was leaving the bar,
Okay.
and that glass and that tail light was found around his body there in the snow.
Hmm.
Now, of course, we know the defense says that they believe that the cop Michael Proctor planted that,
Hmm.
but he says it was in the snow. And so then the defense comes back and says the Canton Police Department were the first people there around John's body that day when he was injured there. And the Canton Police Department immediately, when they looked around, they never saw that. Well, the prosecution comes back and says, of course they didn't see it. It was buried in the snow. There was a blizzard, there was like 6, 7, 8 inches of snow. And
Wow.
interesting enough, he said that when the paramedics lifted up John, that underneath him, you could almost see the ground. That you could see the ground because you could see that the snow piled up through the night. So the
Mm,
prosecution is saying that they believe he was there the whole time after Karen left. So then, remember when I talked about the digital footprint of going down the stairs?
yes. Descending.
Prosecution comes
Mm,
back and says the same time when they were coming to Albert's home in in the SUV, in Karen's SUV, that there are two hills that you go down. You go down one hill up, and then you go down another hill.
hmm
And that the dissension was not him going down those steps, but it was when they were going down those two hills right before you get to the residence. And it was
mm,
around the same time. So he comes back and says that. He says regarding the magic hair, he said it was below freezing. It froze on the bumper, you know. It wasn't a magic hair, it was frozen on the bumper. And of course, you know, they say that their reconstructionist, which was Trooper Joe Paul, that he reconstructed it and said that he saw that from looking at the car that it was in reverse up to 24 miles per hour. He believes the car hit John O'Keefe, spun him around, he fell back, hit his head, and that's how he got the blunt force trauma on the head. And then, of course, hypothermia was a part of the cause of his death as well. The thing that between you and I that I still have a problem with, if he did hit his head there at that curb, why was his body found 10 yards up in the yard
yeah,
and not right there at the curb? I
exactly.
mean, did it bounce up there? I mean,
Yeah.
how did that? So there's a lot of questions about this, you
And
know.
my question is how could a someone getting hit by a car throw them into a yard, or was the car in the yard?
No, no, the car was out there on the road. What the prosecution is saying is that it hit his arm, spun him around, and he hit his head. Now, the only other reason that I could think that if this was what happened, uh, the only other reason I could say what happened, maybe if that did happen that way, he did hit his head, then maybe he got up, and maybe he was stunned and he was walking a little farther and then he fell. But you would think that there would be
Mm,
blood trails there if that would
exactly.
happen. But again, keep in mind that it came a blizzard that night, and
Yeah,
it could have covered that up. So uh, the bottom line is, and I think we're probably getting kind of close to our time, but the bottom line is, uh, how are we doing on time, by the way?
we're good on time.
Okay. The bottom line is here is my take on it, James. If I was in the jury and heard both the defense and both the prosecution, I concur with you. There is certainly reasonable doubt.
Hmm
I don't believe I don't believe that either person proved without a reasonable doubt that it happened the way they said it happened.
Right,
I don't believe that the prosecution proved that it happened that way, and I don't believe the defense proved that it happened that way.
right.
I don't think there's enough evidence to convict the people in that house that they beat him up.
Hmm
But I don't think there's enough evidence to say that Karen hit him either. So, in the court of law today, you have to bring a case to prove beyond reasonable doubt that it happened. And I think the prosecution did not do that. So I would have voted if I was on that jury. I wouldn't have voted that she was innocent. I would have voted that she's not guilty.
Right,
And there's a difference between innocent and not guilty.
correct.
And you can see this a little bit in the experts as they were coming, because one description I saw was when they were talking about these witnesses that they brought in, the expert witnesses, that the witnesses themselves, the expert witnesses themselves, seemed a little doubtful. I mean, one said, well, it's likely that it happened this way, and it's just as likely that it happened the other way, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was their own experts said, it is likely that it happened this way, or it's likely that it happened the other way. So I don't think that either the defense or the prosecution proved what really happened that night. What do
Yeah.
you
So
think?
like I said, I still think that there's too much doubt.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm agreeing with you. I think that she's not guilty. She's
yeah.
certainly not innocent. I mean, obviously something happened, especially with the voicemail messages, and some of the things. The fact that she was drunk, a couple of several factors that played in there. But as
Hmm.
far as her being guilty of any of it, I would say she's maybe, but can they prove it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's the,
And
that's the
here's the
catch.
other thing. Unfortunately, and you know me, I'm retired law enforcement and pro law enforcement all the way, but the investigation was sloppy. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
the investigation was sloppy. There's no doubt about it. I mean, sometimes you have to go into you in an investigation, even though you think you know that this person did it, you've got to also exclude other people.
yep.
And he did. There was no investigation to exclude the people in that house. They did not immediately interview the people in the house. They did not even have the owner of the house come out that morning.
Hmm.
They did not go in and say, "Hey, can we search the house?" I mean, if they didn't have a search warrant, this is a cop. This is a cop. His cop friend died on this guy's lawn.
Exactly, exactly.
He should want to find out what happened as much as anybody else. Well, let us search your house to make sure, so that we can say that it certainly didn't happen out here. It had to happen out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
So in this situation, I believe that even though Proctor may have thought, consciously or subconsciously, he was doing his friend a favor by not bringing him into the investigation, he actually did a disservice for his friend.
he
In
did.
fact, Brian Albert on the stand, I heard him say, they said, the defense attorney says, "Did anybody search your house to see if there were signs of a struggle, signs of a fight?" And Brian Albert himself said, "No, but I wish they had." You know,
Interesting.
you know.
Ah, okay.
So I mean, now he could be lying about that too, though.
Of
But
course.
the point is that it's too late now. Brian Albert already sold his house. He got rid of his dog, and he got rid of his phone, which is suspicious activity in and of itself.
Was he suspended as well?
No, no, actually he wasn't. He actually retired, and really there was no reason to suspend him because I mean. He wasn't involved in the investigation. He didn't he wasn't a part of the investigation. And at this point, all they have is accusations. There's no proof that Brian Albert got in a fight with John O'Keefe.
Yep.
There's a lot of suspicious activity on behalf of the people that were in the house. But think about this too. And here's something really I think that people ought to think about. They got into Michael Proctor's private phone and they found these horrible texts, right? Uh, Not too many of us would really want somebody to get in our phone and publicize what we say to one another
No,
out there,
no.
right?
Right.
So it could be that the reason, Brian Albert and some of these other people that got rid of their phones was they said, "Hey, we've not done anything wrong, but I sure don't want somebody to go back and see private conversations I've had with other people and it go out on the news media and it get out everywhere, with that." So that could be the rationales behind him getting rid of his phone. He also, you know, maybe he thought that they were going to try to prove that the dog bit John O'Keefe, and maybe they would try to put the dog down, and he didn't want the dog to go down, so they found him another home to save the dog's life. There's a lot of questions that could be answered in a different way. So, bottom line is, I don't think James that I can prove that he was beat up in that house, and I don't think I can prove that he was hit by Karen's car on the basis of the evidence in this case.
I agree. I agree. So how would you vote if you were on the jury?
I'd vote not guilty again because there was this. There was no doubt about it. There was actually not enough. They did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, what is going to come as we wrap it up? The new prosecutor, I think, will go at this totally different.
Hmm.
I think he will really focus in, if he believes that he was hit with that car, I think he will do more to prove that happened. I don't think they'll spend as much time bringing in, you know, 70 people to get up and talk. I think they'll focus in on the side, on the fact that car hit him, if they believe it did,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll bring, I think, even better learned experts than the one trooper they did, who will come in and say that. So, but then again, maybe this new prosecutor will look at it and say, "Hey, I don't think we have enough evidence to take it to trial,"
Right.
and may not even prosecute. So there we are, folks. I hope everybody's enjoyed this series. We've taken this about as far as we can take it.
Yep.
We would love to hear what you say about it.
Absolutely.
The idea was to put you in the jury box, you folks that are listening. So go ahead, reach out with that shout out. Tell us, what do you think? Would you vote not guilty? I would vote not guilty. James would vote not guilty.
Absolutely.
Well, how about you out there? Would you vote not guilty or not? Or do you really believe there was enough evidence to say that he was beat up in that house? I think it could happen, but I don't think there was enough evidence to prove it. So, but what do you say out there? Reach out to us, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Hey, if you'd like to support the program, go to peacemakernetwork.com. Read about how we help those heroes out there, the military, first responders, law enforcement. And don't forget to subscribe, become a part of the crime family, and join us next week for another podcast. So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.